Hello, welcome to the new P&L, Patterns and Leaders. Every month, business leaders review a profit and loss statement to understand the results of their business. But what if there was another P&L? One that reflected the patterns, leadership, growth, trust, and human decisions behind those results. This is the new P&L. Last episode, we explored the idea that feeling stuck may be a signal. And today we're going to ask a different question. How does that growth actually happen? Joining me today is Kryssi Murrell, co-owner of K&K Accounting Services. Kryssi has built multiple businesses and has a unique ability to create order, accountability, and sustainable growth in complex financial environments.
And joining me is Michael Winn, CEO of RBOA. Michael is fascinated by patterns, leadership, and the idea that personal growth and business growth are often inseparable.
Kryssi, I've got another scenario about two companies.
Okay.
And when they look back over the last 3 years, they both doubled the amount of revenue in that 3-year period. But I want to focus on company A and company B and how they grew, because this is going to give us some insight into another pattern that I like to call the growth engine. I think a lot of people will resonate once we kind of unpack this. So company A grew because they were experimenting with innovation. They took calculated risks. They really did deep market research to understand that there was an opportunity for expansion. And that those were kind of the 4 pillars, if you will, of company A's growth during that 3-year period. Now, company B grew because they had very well documented processes. They were extremely consistent. They had high level of operational excellence, and they were absolutely on point with execution. So same outcome, 3 years, doubled revenue, totally different growth engines.
From the accounting perspective, the financial statements may look almost identical, but the experience of operating those businesses is completely different.
And that's why we call this the new P&L, because the traditional P&L helps us understand what happened. We're interested in understanding why it happened. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So what is a growth engine? Last episode we talked about awareness. And today I thought what we could explore, Kryssi, is what happens next. Why do some people feel moving forward? They feel that energy of moving forward, and then others remain stuck. Like, is there a process behind growth itself? Let me ask you, Kryssi, what comes to mind when you hear the phrase growth engine?
When I hear that, the first thing I think about are processes that you have within your company. Because if you have processes that everyone follows, I think it's easier to grow. And because you're going to determine what works and what doesn't work.
I love that. And that's such a from someone who is absolutely, their critical job is to make sure the ones and the zeros add up. That process needs to be absolutely 100% mapped out. Well, when we go back to company A and company B, you just described company B to a T, right? Process, consistency, execution, like you nailed it, right? But there's company A that grew and they did something totally different. They were being innovative, they were experimenting, they were being risky. Like, I feel like if the CEO of company A and the CEO of company B got together, they would be like nails on a scratch board, because the CEO for company B would be like, no, we're not going to experiment. They're not going to take calculated risk, right? And it's not like good or bad, it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that what I've observed, in my own life is I've started noticing this pattern. I'm 55 years old. I've had a couple of decades of really amazing work. I've worked with some amazing companies, and now as CEO of RBOA. I'm looking back over my life and I can see this pattern. I talked about in episode one the whole COVID um, virtual events scenario, but there was another one that happened even before that, and that was around this idea of I wanted to create a podcast to talk about all the different things that were moving and happening, especially related to like social media and search engine optimization and all the things that were really really just on this incredible parabolic growth from say 15, 16, 17, and 18, leading into that COVID time period. And what I noticed when I look back and I think about it is I have this like curiosity, like something will get my attention, right? And I'll look at it and I'm like, huh, that's different. I'm curious. I wonder, like how does that play out? And so then I start exploring whether it's, I watch YouTube videos or I listen to podcasts or I download the app on my phone or I get the app installed on my, desktop or, if it's in the WordPress world, we built over 280 websites over the last decade. So if it's a new plugin and that really enhances capability, I get in there and I explore it. But then I need to learn. And this is the part that's really unique for me and my pattern. Um, is that I go through this sort of exploration phase, I'm literally learning a new skill, right? It goes back to your bookkeeping, right? I'm learning this new skill. I mean, and oh my gosh, like AI right now, are you kidding me? Right?
Right.
Whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever it is, I'm exploring those and I'm learning all of those. But it doesn't stop there. And this is what's really interesting, Kryssi. And I don't know why it is, but this is my DNA. And I'm not like, I'm owning it. And it's this: in order for me to like absorb and really experience this full growth engine, I have to share just a little bit that I've learned with someone else. And just that process alone of going from curiosity to exploration to learning and then sharing it with someone else, whether it's sharing with someone on my team, sharing it with a coworker, sharing it with a colleague or a client, it creates growth in me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Kryssi, there's nothing more powerful than that. And I can tell you, when we talked about last episode, that stuck pattern, I get it. When I find myself in that, the I know immediately I need to go learn something. Just go start learning something. And that has truly, I mean, I could go back and name a couple of other instances where that happened, but it's just crazy. I said I literally would go to Vegas and bet on this. It's happened so many times in my life.
Wow. When did you first notice this pattern?
Kryssi, I gotta tell you, like I feel like I was like Neo in the Matrix and was like oblivious to all of this stuff really until 2026, which is
Wow.
why I'm so compelled to do this show. Because I
Wow.
need to tell people about this because it is absolutely the most energizing in a world that is filled with deceit and uncertainty. For people to be able to hold on to and grab a hold of growth in a time like this, I'm like, I gotta do this. I want to do this. And I think that I was listening to a podcast, and I want to say it was Diary of a CEO. And the guy that was on the show, he made a comment, and it was just like this aha moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, I do that. I can go back, and this is it is so fundamentally visible in my life. Like I said, like I would literally go to Vegas and push all my chips in, because it just rings true. And when I'm in these moments, and I'm in one of them now, what's the most exciting about it is that when the doubt or the fear or those things try to come in, man, it's really hard to penetrate that energy field that's around me, because I know I'm in the growth engine. And all I got to do is say, in my mind, I'm like, no, let me dismiss that, and let me go pull back up my, chat GBT conversation where I'm like going back and forth with, this idea, right? That's a version of my exploration. Or I pick up the phone and call another colleague. And so once you see this, you can't unsee it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, And I know that, when you and I talked before we even did our first episode, and I kind of shared with you what I'm sharing now, and you kind of look back and you thought about the QuickBooks story. Now that you've had time to think about that, do you see that pattern? Have you seen it in your life before?
I have. When we first talked about it, I was like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And then, and then, and
Kryssi, you're
then
not alone. Yeah, you're not alone. There are so many times where I'm like trying to explain my pattern and my growth engine, and people are like, "What language are you speaking, Michael Winn?" So I get
and
it.
I really think, once you told it to me and I sat back and think, I'm like, you know what? I could think back to times where I honestly think my growth engine is learning. Like you said, curiosity first, because that is what makes you learn. That you want to learn what you're curious about. And then just the determination to figure it out and find out and not quit. So I think that is like how I go. That's what I do. I'm curious, and then I start learning about it, researching, and then once it turns on, it's like, oh, I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to learn it so good that people come to me and ask me questions. So, and I just learn it and you continue to learn and you continue to grow, and it's just a cycle, I think.
It totally is, Kryssi. I think this is the other thing. Like when you really start to unpack this, that if there's a growth engine, there's probably an opposite of the growth engine, right? Like if growth is one side, then maybe we use like ungrowth, that's not a word. Limiting, maybe it's limiting, right? And you find yourself, I've heard people say things like, you know, they just feel like something is preventing growth, you know. Maybe it's kind of the shadow side. If you right, if growth is the light, or growth is this energy, then the opposite of that is withdraw, not wanting to speak or not wanting to share with others. Like that's how I relate it. I just
Mm-hmm.
and so to think about it in an opposite, then it's really easy to kind of think about, well, what are the things that would get in the way of growth, right? You talked about it before in the last episode, right? The fear or the doubt. Um, and here's another thing. There's this idea that there are these human behaviors that drive every human decision, and one of them is the need for significance. And that is the one thing about the pattern, the growth engine, that I understand about myself, is that I really don't care what
Mm-hmm.
people think. about me when I'm in the growth engine. It's like I'm on my own superpower fuel. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
It is so it's the energy that comes with it is just so powerful. It is like fuel for life. Makes me, want to eat better. It makes me want to go to the gym. You know, maybe cut back on some of the other things that I indulge a little bit too much in, right? Um, but I mean, it's different for everybody. Um, I don't know. I'm sure you've gone through times in your life where you just weren't feeling it, or you've known people, right? That just there's that side, and if you once you experience the growth engine, once you experience that, when you meet someone, I don't know. For me, Kryssi, maybe I'm just like got some weird wiring on the inside. It's really obvious. Like, have you ever been to a job and it is really clear that the person that's doing the job absolutely hates their job?
Right. Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. That's where it shows up,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But
Yeah.
I think that that being aware that there is this growth pattern, and like you said, Kryssi, when you're like, yeah, I can look back at my life and I can see that it's happened before and I went through those steps. And just that awareness alone creates a different reality, right? Because now you've seen it and
Mm-hmm.
you can't put the genie back in the box, you know? And so what I've really started to wrestle with is this idea that, okay, I've recognized that I've got this pattern. I've figured out how to utilize it, right? Like whatever that looks like in life, whether it's starting a podcast or a blog or whatever it is, the utilization for me is that sharing part, right? Sharing with my friends or sharing it with coworkers. But then, so I recognize it first, then I utilize it, and then I create something new that comes out of it. And so, again, I go back to that Diary of a CEO episode, and I remember the speaker said, if I'm raising kids right now in 2026, I think one of the most important things to do would be for people to understand pattern recognition and how important it is. And I think about that. I think about AI. What is AI? It is just a gigantic, large learning, the LLM, the large learning model or whatever. It's just pattern recognition. But as humans, do we do that? And until you actually think about your growth engine, you're probably just unaware,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think that's for those who are listening, how to recognize, you've got to be able to identify what are those steps where I can go back in my life and see that moment of growth. And then can I go back and say that I, really leaned into whatever that growth engine is, and then ask yourselves what is possible if I trust it. Remember what I say?
Right.
I'm going to Vegas. I'm putting all my chips in. I trust it that much, right? Like that is belief.
That is belief for sure.
So I'm sure, for those who are listening, you've maybe had, moments of growth in your life. Think about what those have in common. See if you can pick out those common moments, because I think that's important. I think the other thing, like Kryssi, remember when you were saying, like, what happens right before you grow? What, right? It's that moment where you're like confronted with that thing, right?
Yeah.
Don't ignore that.
Don't ignore it. Go for it. Just go for it.
Right, right.
Just put in your mind, this is what we're going to do, because you're going to grow. Even if it doesn't work out, you're still going to grow from it. Something positive, personal growth, business growth, it's going to happen.
Kryssi, I think that's probably why I'm really excited that we're going to do 8 episodes of this podcast together. Because I think what you said, you just nailed it. That what we're going to talk about, it's really the intersection of like personal growth meets business growth. Because I wanted to make this with another CEO. I've known you. I know the incredible work that you do. I know you care about your people. And as soon as we started talking about this, and I said, what do you hope? What did I say, Kryssi? I said, what do you hope to get from this? What did you say?
Personal growth.
You said personal growth, 100%.
100%.
So I hope that if you are listening to this episode and you feel stuck, but you want more, I really hope that you will tune into episode 3. Episode 3 is going to be interesting. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence and about how it's learning patterns at this like parabolic rate. And so if that's machines getting smarter, then what's the flip side of that as humans? Then what if the future belongs to people who learn to understand each other? Because I know right now everybody's like learning all the chat GPT and all the Claude and all the different things. Nobody is talking about how do we understand each other better? How do we understand what about human connection and trust and how valuable that will be? So I'm excited for episode 3. We're so glad that you guys tuned in today to listen to Kryssi and I. And remember this: the numbers tell us what happened.
The patterns and leaders help us understand why.
We'll see you next time on the new P&L.